Hi, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the Setter Tales podcast. I'm Wade, and Thomas is off tonight, and I'm going to be flying solo. One of the things we want to talk about is getting dogs ready for the field. And our good friend Ian Donovan, who spent many, many years training military dogs for the United States Army, is back with us again, and we're going to bring him in and get right to it because he's got a lot of information and we want to make sure that we touch on everything we can. Ian, how we doing tonight?
Good, man. How are you? It's good to be back.
Good. You know, I saw you, a week ago. You were at a heroes hunt that we had last Sunday, a week ago, and you were here helping us guide and getting some of the law enforcement guys out in the field, and we appreciated you coming clear up from Tennessee to help us with that.
Well, man, that was a great time. It's a great event, and now that I'm in the states more often, hopefully I can help out every year. That'd be
Yeah,
something
and it was fun
that's really
getting
fun.
a chance to hunt with you the following day and try to, as we say, chase some of those residual birds that were not harvested by the groups the day before. And
For sure. Yeah,
gosh, there were
it's
quite a
definitely
few
a
out there.
target-rich environment.
We put up a few. We put a few in the air, as they say. So that was fun. One of the things we spoke about when we were having lunch after the hunt. We talked about some of the important things that sometimes confuses people, especially newer individuals to the hunting game and trying to train their new dog and for the first time, and they hear all this stuff about e-collars, and as you know, e-collars and that whole nomenclature and technology can be pretty confusing to somebody that's trying to uh, navigate through that for the first time. So tonight we're going to have you just kind of lay out the basics, I guess, the e-collar 101, if you will, and we'll go through some of the things that have been successful for you over the years training dogs, and when it comes to conditioning that dog. And what people need to understand is you just don't strap a collar on and light a dog up. That's probably not the right thing to do.
Right.
But it does happen. Unfortunately, it happens. You probably hear those stories.
All too
Um,
often. Yeah.
so basically, let's start. And I've got a young dog, and we actually do have a young dog that's kind of getting to that point where we're wanting to make sure they're good and collared conditioned. What's the first step that we should go through?
Right. Well, the first step is familiarizing yourself with a collar prior to ever putting it on a dog. You know, going through all of the functions of the collar, making sure that you're familiar with it before you strap it on the dog. And there are a lot of things these e-collars can do for you, both good and bad. Good if you really know what you're doing, and bad if you're unfamiliar with how to utilize it properly. So first and foremost, and I've got an e-collar here that I can kind of go through. We'll talk about the different features of an e-collar. We're just using a Dogtra Arc e-collar here, but you've got your remote and you've got your receiver, right? This is going to be on a collar on the dog's neck. Um, the remote's pretty easy. You're going to have different buttons on every single remote, one for vibrate normally and one for stimulation or pressure, electronic pressure, sending that to the dog. One of the big things to look for in an e-collar and a good e-collar is a very, very large range of sensitivity, okay, from zero. So this e-collar goes from 0 to 120. Okay, that's extremely important when it comes to using this more as a communicatory device than a punishment, right? And we don't want the dog to think this is a punishment. So we want a very, very large range, and we'll talk about why that's important in a minute. But a large range on your receiver, you're going to have on-off button. You're going to have stimulation for electricity. You're also going to have vibrate, and you're going to have your stimulation, elevation, or adjustment knob, right? And then your antenna. Most e-collars are going to have 3/4 of a mile range, line of sight distance. And then another key feature is a nick and constant. We're going to talk a lot about that and why I utilize one much more than I utilize the other. On your receiver, it's pretty easy. The two connection points are really going to be what you need to focus on mainly. They've both got to be making contact with the dog's skin in order for him to feel any stimulation from the collar. So pay attention to the points, how sharp they are or how wide they are. The flatter the point, the more comfortable it's going to be on the dog, the more difficult it's going to be to penetrate a double coat of a lab or the long hair of a setter. right? So we need to make sure that we've got the right connections, contact points on the collar, depending on what type of dog we're trying to utilize this with. And again, both have to be making contact with the skin in order for the dog to feel it. This is going to be on some sort of a flat collar when you get it. But what we like to do is keep it on the flat collar for the portion that goes over the receiver, but then put a bungee cord system on it so that when we put it on the dog and tighten it up or cinch it tight, a bungee cord is what we use as a tightening device as opposed to more like a belt for a person, right? The bungee cord allows the dog's neck to expand and contract, um, his airway to move freely when he's breathing, panting heavily. So that's something that I've learned really works well for the collar system is putting some sort of a bungee on there and the clasp device so that when you tighten it down, it's the bungee cord instead of a flat collar that's doing the tightening. Um, and again, with the receiver, you're going to have your on off button, a way to pair it up with the remote, but you're also going to have an indication system as far as lights go. With this particular collar, every time you depress the button, it blinks green if it's charged, amber if it needs charging, and red if it's about to die. Okay, or orange if it needs charging, red if it's about to die. Um, Familiarize yourself with the system prior to putting it on the dog. Practice putting it on and taking it off the dog frequently. Make sure that you can get good contact with the dog's skin every time you put it on. Make sure it's tight enough. One rule of thumb is to be able to put two fingers underneath it. And that's tight enough to where he's going to be able to feel the pressure from the contacts, but loose enough that he can still breathe and blood flows going, from the body to the brain. Um, but practice putting it on and off the dog, taking it on and off the dog. Let the dog wear it. Let the dog understand that this is just another piece of equipment that is going to be following him in the field, and put it on whenever you're going to feed him. Associated with positive things too. Those are some of the first things that we like to start off doing with an e-collar with any dog.
And when you talked about the prongs, you can get different lengths of those too, as I understand it,
Correct.
depending on what kind of dog you got it on, and
Hmm.
whether you got like you said, a setter or a lab or something that has a little heavier coat than some of the real short coated dogs. So that's another thing,
Yep.
and that may be an option that you have to purchase, or that you look at the time you buy the collar. But
For
I know
sure.
some of
Yeah,
them
you've
some
got
of them have different
aftermarket
prongs.
contacts for almost every single collar out there. These are contacts that came with the collar.
Right, right.
They work for my dogs because I run really slick coated dogs. But for the Malinois or the setters or the labs, we definitely have to change these guys out and get something that works more with whatever coat type the dog that you're working with has. But in the beginning, read your owner's manual thoroughly and understand every feature of this collar system. Practice taking it on, putting it on the dog, taking it off the dog, associated with good things, food time. If your dog loves to retrieve, put it on, let him retrieve. And we're not pressing any buttons at this point. We're just letting the dog get accustomed to the way that these things feel on his neck because it's a little different than just a regular flat collar.
Right.
So those are the first steps that we're going to take in introducing the e-collar to the dog properly. From there, we're going to really start talking about e-collar conditioning, what that means, and what it really looks like, and what it should look like for each dog, because it's what normally gets skipped over when guys get this device. They kind of just throw it on the dog and they're off to the races. And if utilized improperly, it could really put some speed bumps in your training progression with any dog, but especially a young dog that's looking to you for some advice in training, and you're just kind of creating some real pitfalls in your training program if you don't know how to utilize it properly. One thing I want to show you guys, and we want to go into, is once you're familiar with the collar system, right? You know how to turn it on, you know how to turn it off, you know what all the buttons mean, you know how to adjust the stimulation. We need to talk about Nick versus constant. Okay, meaning most of these devices have what's considered Nick. Every time I depress the button, and each collar system is going to come with one of these devices. You put it on the contact points, and every time you depress the button, it's going to give you an indication as to whether or not electricity is flowing through these contact points or not. A lot of people use it to make sure that the collar system's working properly. I use it to kind of demonstrate the difference between Nick and Constant. I'll always put this on myself prior to putting it on any dog to ensure that it's working properly. And a large range is really good for that. It'll allow you to understand exactly what the dog's feeling. A lot of owners are apprehensive to put this on a dog, and that's one thing that I do with them. I put it on their arm and I give them the remote, and I let them start from zero and climb up in the numbers and press the button and see what exactly it feels like. A lot of dogs don't even feel it until you get to a 10, on a good collar system. Um, but the difference between Nick and Constant, okay, Nick, every time I depress the button, you can see the little light in the top of that device.
Yep.
That's telling me that electrical current's running through there. Every time I depress the button in Nick, the dog's going to feel pressure or stimulation for about 3/4 of a second. Went over to constant and depress the button. The collar's going to pulsate on the dog's neck. Every time I press the button, it's going to be bump, 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 bump. That's very important in the beginning with young dogs. I really want the dog to understand when I'm trying to communicate with him through the collar. And Nick, in a lot of instances, will confuse the dog because he only feels pressure for 3/4 of a second, right? As opposed to constant, where there's a constant pulsation on his neck. It's very hard for him to ignore that as actual collar pressure, right? So we'll talk a lot about Nick and constant. Most of these collar systems have a vibrate function. I really don't utilize vibrate, primarily because it doesn't increase in intensity, right? So vibrate is just vibrate. It doesn't go up in intensity or down in intensity. And if a dog just understands that if he gets used to ignoring that sensation on his neck, you know, there's no way to go up from there, right? There's no way to increase the intensity of it. And another really big thing about e-collars is I don't ever teach a dog anything with an e-collar that he doesn't already know on leash. Okay, an e-collar is not a magical button to press that'll just you know speed your process along. I take my time and I ensure that he understands all the commands on leash prior to instilling them with an e-collar as well. What that looks like is, yeah, positive reinforcement for all the commands prior to putting an e-collar on him. And then I utilize the e-collar in showing him that this is a communicatory device. We're going to use this to communicate with one another. Okay. It's not a punishment. And the way that I condition the dog to an e-collar is how I teach him that. And that's kind of what we'll move into next.
Okay, and so so the collars that we have or that we utilize are obviously similar to that. They're dogsters as well, and we have a locate feature, which obviously you don't use in your military application, and
Mm-hmm.
probably in some of your close working dogs you don't need that. We obviously like that in cover, heavy cover. You probably saw me using it the other day when we were hunting, and we had
Sure.
the setters were in some of that cover over our heads, and it's just for me to kind of get a general idea of their range and where they are, and that's what it's called, locate. But
Yeah. Yeah.
and and sometimes that can be overdone. Sometimes some guys kind of get too reliant on that and are on the button all the time and that type of thing, and that can confuse the dog too because typically my dogs know if they hear the double beep on the locate that kind of means they need to find me or check in. Basically, they're
Right.
probably too far away, and now then they'll move back towards me and get a little closer and check in, kind of thing. And that's just how we've trained them to do that. But most people are, I guess, upland people that are getting collars may run into that locate feature as well on
Sure.
some of the
Yeah.
collars.
Yeah, and I utilize it with my dogs as well. I need to know where the dog is, but I tone the dog for a recall because most of the time that dog's going to be out of. He could be without a earshot, or there's a lot of wind, or the cover's super thick and he's down in it, and he may not be able to hear me. So I tone recall my dogs, and we can kind of talk about what that
Okay.
looks like too. It's kind of the same as whistle sit. When I'm teaching waterfowl dogs or labs or a dog that you want to teach, one short blast on a whistle means sit down and look at me. Um, But you just brought up something that's pretty important in training, and that's confusion, right? When a dog's confused, it's my fault as the trainer because I'm not being clear and concise in my guidance. Okay, and I never, ever um, reprimand for confusion because again, that's my fault. I reprimand for blatant disobedience. Okay, that means when the dog totally understands what it is that I'm asking him to do, and he just thinks, I think I'd rather do what I'd like to do. That's when I correct for blatant disobedience. But if I'm asking a dog to do something and he's attempting to do it, but he's not doing it to my standard, maybe, or he's doing something, he's kind of muddying it up, right? He's confused, and that's my fault for not giving him clear and concise guidance. And I'll just back up and I'll help him along the way and kind of guide him. It's a teamwork uh, drill. This is it takes a ton of patience to do this, but especially with an e-collar, if you find yourself, getting a little upset, a little hot-headed, um, you don't want to use that e-collar to make yourself feel better because it'll really hamper what you're trying to do with the dog. Okay, and I mean, using the e-collar to punish the dog is one of the worst things that you can do with the e-collar. We drive it at home that this e-collar is just a form of communication. I've got a 10-year-old dog. When he comes out of the kennel and we go to work, we put an e-collar on. It's not a form of discipline for him or reprimand. It's how we communicate with one another. Okay, and that's where the range of this e-collar is going to come into play. But let's talk about e-collar conditioning and how we do it, and kind of what I've learned is one of the best ways to do it. I'll take a new dog, a young dog, or an old dog, a dog that's got no e-collar experience, and I'll take him and put him in as sterile an environment as I can get. Meaning, I don't want a ton of distractions out there. I don't want kids running around or other dogs running around or cars. You go into you know, a sterile environment as you can get, a corner of a field, someplace where not much is going on. And I utilize a 30-foot leash, and I let that dog wander out to the end of that 30-foot leash. And I'm going to start with pressure on the e-collar, right? From a one on this receiver. I'm going to go to one, and it's going to be on continuous. Again, when I press the button, the dog's going to feel pulsating on his neck. Okay. I press the button and I watch the dog and look for a reaction out of the dog. 10 times out of 10 almost, the dog's never going to feel it on that low of a setting. So I bump it up to two. I do the same thing, three, so on and so forth, until I see the dog give me some sort of reaction. There's a few different reactions that the dog is going to give you once he feels e-collar pressure for the first time. One of those is he may fight it, right? He may start trying to bite at the collar. If you're the only thing in his world, he may try to bite you. Not so much with these floppy ear dogs or these upland dogs, retrievers, but definitely with our bite dogs. They know one way to get out of a bad situation is to bite you. So that's one thing they may do. They may try to fight it. They may try to run away. They may try to, fight or flight, right? So they may just try to run away from it. That's why he's on a 30-foot leash. I'll go ahead and I'll ease off pressure, let them calm down, let them start moving again. Movement for dogs really takes care of a lot of anxiety. And then we'll start over. So fight, flight, he may just accept it. The dog may most really intelligent dogs understand that you're not out there to hurt them, and really not much in the environment's out there to hurt them either. So they'll look at you for guidance. Okay, and then another reaction that you may see is just the dog freezes up. He doesn't know what this anomaly is. He's never felt it before, so he just thinks if he freezes up, doesn't move, it may just go away, right? But what you're looking for, what I look for when I understand that the dog feels pressure at the lowest level, okay, the lowest setting he can possibly feel it. The sterile environment is so important. When there's a ton of distractions, those numbers are going to have to be much higher for the dog to feel it because you and I are talking right now and you can hear exactly everything I'm saying. If we were having this conversation in a concert, I'd be having to scream at you for you to hear the same thing. And that's the same example of a sterile environment as opposed to, an environment with a ton of distractions, right? That high distraction environment as a concert, you want to take them in a one-on-one talk type environment. So as sterile environment as you can get. And that allows you to see when he feels the lowest number, the lowest level of intensity on that collar. And that's where we want to start working with the dog. And in all of this conditioning, what I'm teaching the dog to do is shut pressure off. He needs to understand that he controls whether or not he feels pressure. The way that I do that is I look for a reaction from the dog. Once he feels pressure, it may be an ear twitch or a head turn. When he feels pressure, he's got to do something to turn it off. He can't just freeze up. He can't run away from it. He can't fight it. Okay, it's going to continue until he does something to shut it off. Normally, what that looks like is movement. Okay, um, anytime he moves or he turns towards me, pressure goes away. I teach the dog that he can move through it and he can shut it off that way. Moving first is all I'm looking for. And then very quickly, I want that dog to start turning into me when he feels pressure. So it's bump, 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 and he takes off. I let it go. Okay. He ease off of pressure. Bump, 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 bump. He's going to start having, through successful approximation, we're going to teach him exactly what we want him to do when he feels pressure. But I want the dog in small increments, really, to start turning and looking at me, and then pressure goes away. The whole thing is, in this environment, right, when you feel pressure, I need you to start trying to figure out how to shut it off. Okay. We're going to train these dogs and drive. These are drivey dogs. We're going to utilize pressure in order to do that. Push and pull. We'll teach them how to go away from us with pressure to shut it off, how to come to us to shut it off. Um, and then in obedience, pressure works extremely well because it's super timely. So again, this could take a few sessions. It could take a few days of a few sessions a day. It all depends on the dog's intelligence level and your timing with the e-collar. So again, look for those small little changes that he gives you and then shut pressure off. Teach him that he's got to do something to shut it off. And then very quickly turn that something into looking at you and then moving towards you. Okay. When he feels pressure and he starts moving towards you and it shuts off, from there, we're going to start doing other things with him.
So it's probably one of the basic ones uh, that we've used in the past, and most people start with is the kennel command. I mean, that's a pretty simple. The dog understands when you say kennel, he's going in the crate or he's going into the dog kennel, and then by giving that command, and if he does go into the crate while that pressure is being while he's being stimulated with that pressure, and then once he does that command and he goes in the crate and the stimulation stops, then basically he's learning that, okay, to stop that pressure, I just need to go in the crate like he told me to.
Absolutely.
Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Again, I don't, he knows most obedience. He knows come, sit, kennel, or place, get up on a place object of some sort prior to e-collar conditioning. Okay. Before you put an e-collar on him and he's conditioned to how to shut it off, you can give him all those commands. And yeah, he may want to listen to them. He may want to obey, but there's going to be the time where he doesn't want to. Now, how do you hold him accountable for deciding to disobey you? Right. Um, Food or treat training is only good as long as the dog's he's full. There's really no more incentive for him to obey you, right? So this e-collar is now become a form of holding him accountable, a way that you can hold him accountable, right? So the reason that I stop with the conditioning process when the dog starts coming to me is I don't want pressure to only mean recall, okay? I don't want pressure to just mean come and run to me. I want to be able to pull him to me with it. I want to be able to push him away with it, right? So from there, I'll give him the come command. He comes to me. If he looks at me, right? Like if I say come and I understand, and the dog understands the command, he looks at me, he looks out away from me, decides to go the other way. That's when bump, 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 and I repeat the command. I repeat the command as I apply pressure because the dog understands he's got to do something to shut pressure off. Well, now I'm giving him the answer to the problem. You feel pressure, you hear the command, you know what the command means. When you listen to the command or obey the command, pressure goes away, right? So I'm giving you the answer to the test now. And that's what I mean by a communicatory device. We just use it to communicate better with the dog. An e-collar is nothing more than a very long leash that you have on your animal. It gives you control of the dog both by your side and 3/4 of a mile away from you, really. Same thing with sit. Fido, sit. He looks at you. Every time I have to repeat the command, sit, 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 right? So every time I say the command, I press, I give him stimulation with the collar. And he understands he's got to do something to shut it off. I'm giving him the answer to the test. So you get very timely reactions to what you're asking the dog to do. And you now have a way to hold him accountable if he chooses not to. Listen, I know that you may not want to sit, but this is a good time to sit, right? Um, this is just another reminder as to why you should do what I'm asking you. It's just to shut this pressure off. It's kind of an annoyance. They want to make it go away. Um, but having a high level or a big degree of stimulation on a collar, right, a large range, is going to be super beneficial because, I hear it all the time. Well, my dog listens on a 15 in the house, but then when we go out to the park, we go out in public, or we're hunting, he doesn't feel a 15 at all. Again, it's that concert environment, right? We go from a controlled, sterile type of environment to one with a ton of distractions. And understand, dogs are distracted by things that we don't even know are there. Smells is a big one, right? He smells things that I have no clue, or even in the world, right? Hears things that I can't hear, feels things that I don't know he's feeling. So he's got a ton of distractions. Those numbers just need to go up to be able to communicate with him in a high distraction environment, right? Um, but again, every time that I ask the dog to do something, he's got the choice to do it or not. If he chooses not to, he's just going to feel pressure until he complies. But again, push and pull training. I don't want him to just come to me when he feels pressure. I want to teach him to go into a kennel, right? So if he understands kennel and I say kennel, I'll say kennel and I'll pump, 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 pump. I will depress the button. He'll feel pressure. The second his feet are all in the kennel, it goes away. That teaches a dog to jump in that kennel in order to shut this pressure off. A place table, a place board, a dog bed, same thing. The back of the truck. How often do you have a dog? We were talking about it last week, right? And it's something that I really like to see. I like to see a dog when you're coming back to the truck to swap dogs out or get water or drop birds off. That dog doesn't want to come anywhere near the truck. He wants to stay out and hunt. It can also be kind of annoying if you're on a time crunch, right? Or you will need to swap dogs out or whatever. So having a dog that's got a ton of drive to hunt's great, but we also need that dog to listen to us when we need him to listen to us. So
And
pressure can bring him to you or push him away very
we've
easily.
all seen the guy in the field. We've hunted with that guy in the field that, you know, like you said, the dog in the yard work is responsive, but when pheasants are in the air and shotguns are going off, the dog's excited and running, and the guy, is trying to, tone his dog and or now get that stimulation, but that number that he's used to using isn't working. And what happens is all of a sudden I see that baby gets cranked up,
Yeah.
and it gets cranked up so far that what do you get? You end up that dog. You hear a big yelp out
Hmm.
of that dog, and that's the pitfall right there. That
Yeah.
when people out there, when you lose your patience. And what does the dog get from that when that happens? What message have you sent to that dog now? That
Well, yeah, you never want to hear a vocalization from the dog when you're utilizing an e-collar. Now, the only caveat to that, again, is some dogs, not normally gun dogs or working dogs, but normally pet dogs, will throw a fit. Will kind of throw a temper tantrum and whine and cry if you're asking them to do something and holding them accountable when they don't do it. But you never want to hear that audible response from a dog. You're right. That's too much pressure, and now you're punishing the dog. What it means to the dog is that whatever he was doing at the time that he felt that pressure, he's probably never going to want to do again. Or in order to shut it off, he's got to do something, right? Well, that in the beginning was movement. Okay. If he doesn't know where you are in the field, if he hasn't pinpointed you and pressure, he may bolt to your last known location in his mind, which could be the other end of the field
right,
or
right.
not where you are at the time. And then you get frustrated and bear down. Well, he must need more pressure, right?
So
That's
if
always
so
the
if that
answer.
dog gets punished while he's tracking a rooster and he's on
Oh, yeah.
pheasant scent, that message
Mhm.
has been that's bad. So
Oh,
next time I
sure.
smell pheasant smell that scent, I remember what happened, and then that's
Right.
when the dog is right next to the. I remember a guy telling me that. "Well, I don't know that dog. He won't leave my side. I can't get him to go out there and hunt anymore." Well,
Right.
the last time he did, and he smelled pheasants, out here in this big field, something bad happened to him, and
Yeah.
so now and that's hard to fix. That's
And
hard
it's
to
all a
fix.
part of reading your dog, too. I mean, you've got to know when your dog's birdie, when he's tracking, what is he actually doing out Is he just running around trying to get a few more minutes in the field? Or is he working cover? Is he working a bird? What's the wind doing? What's the topography doing? Could he be in contact with bird odor at that point in time? Is he tracking a bird? Was there a wounded bird knocked down anywhere in that vicinity? You've really got to pay attention to the dog, but with e-collar training, you've got to pay attention to the dog at all times. The dog determines how much pressure he feels, when he feels it, and when he doesn't, right? That's the beauty of e-collar conditioning the proper way and utilizing it properly. The dog's going to determine whether or not he feels pressure when I'm the trainer, right? He's only going to feel pressure when I've asked him to do something and he ignores me or he chooses not to. The first command that I give is never with pressure, ever. I always give the dog a chance to do the right thing or do what I'm asking him to do. And then if I know for a fact that that dog's heard me and understood me, every other time that I've got to repeat that command, he gets pressure. And every time I have to repeat it, pressure goes up incrementally. So at a certain point, the dog's going to say, isn't worth the squeeze. I'm going to comply with what he's asking me to do because I don't want this annoying thing on my neck bothering me every time this guy asks me to do something that I choose to ignore. Um, but again, it's just your way of the best way of communicating with a dog is through an e-collar with a large range of
Right.
sensitivity.
And what people will find out, the breed of dog kind of determines that intensity sometimes. You hear that term, well, like for instance, our setters, their disposition, they're pretty soft in the sense that they don't take a lot of pressure real well. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of pressure to hurt their feelings, and whereas some of the other breeds, might some I've seen labs that just shake their head at you like, yeah, is that all you got? Is that all you?
Oh yeah,
That's nothing.
Chesapeake Bay Retrievers are known for
Yeah, I
that.
mean that same level that had the setter basically sulking, saying, you've been mean to me. The German short hair of the lab is out there just ignoring you because it's no big deal. So that's the other thing with the different breeds of dogs is knowing, and those dogs inside that breed. I mean, even dogs out of the same litter may have a different variance as far as. Do you find that sometimes?
Sure. Yeah. I
Like
mean,
litter
every
mates
dog is
might,
different.
this litter mate might be a 10, but this dog over here, the other one out of the litter might be take a little
Sure.
more
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
less. Just depends on the
Every
dog.
single dog is different. That's why the range is so important. Some of the dogs that you would expect to just be super tough, super hard, dogs that run through barbed wire fences and slice themselves open and just bowl through cover like it's no problem. They're on a 7, whereas that dainty little female, for whatever reason, is in the 30s sometimes and still operating just fine. Every dog's different, and you've really got to pay attention because you can set yourself back really easily with an e-collar and not knowing how to utilize it. The most important thing you can ever teach that dog is that he's got the power to shut it off. And the way that you teach him is to show him how to. Again, you're asking him to do something. He understands how to turn pressure off. He's got to do something. Now you're giving him the answer to that problem. But e-collars are just a wonderful tool to use both for training and then, it doesn't just end for training. I utilize an e-collar every day that I work my dogs, right? So again, it's just the way that I communicate, the tone recall. I've got hounds that I can recall from a mile away if they understand the last place that we were, and a lot of times that's why I don't leave that one spot because they'll come back to me
All right.
from that distance once they hear a tone recall. But it's just a massive tool to have in your toolbox. And when it comes to communicating properly with a dog, there's really no better way to do it. But again, one of the key points to it is making sure that everything you teach with an e-collar, the dog and you both understand with that dog on a leash prior to putting an e-collar on them. That's the more hands-on time you can get with a young dog prior to an e-collar, the better. The more that you can understand the dog prior to putting an e-collar on, the better. The more that you can understand differences or changes in behavior and what that looks like with your dog prior to putting an e-collar on, the better. Um, every dog's different, so it's kind of a challenge when you work with so many dogs to make sure that you can see minute changes in behavior in the beginning of that e-collar conditioning process. But if it's your dog and you've had a lot of a lot of interaction with it, it should be much easier for you to see those little variances and change, right? That you're looking for in the beginning of that process. Um, that's where you make your money. The first few sessions of e-collar conditioning, make sure that you're very timely with shutting that pressure off when he does something, right? You're looking for him to do something to shut that pressure off. And then through successive approximation or baby stepping it, you can get it to where, he felt pressure, he flicked his ear, you shut it off. He felt pressure, he turned his head, you shut it off. He felt pressure, he took a step, you shut it off. He starts turning towards you, you shut it off. He turns towards you now, you need a little more, so you keep on with the pressure until he takes a step towards you, then you shut it off. And then the next time he takes two steps and you shut it off. And now you've got a recall. Again, that's where we'll stop. And now we're going to go through all the different commands that he already knows, but now we're going to use pressure to solidify him, really. And another important thing is, don't, the first time you tell him to do something, don't use pressure. That's his chance to comply with you, to work with you, right? The second and third and maybe fourth or fifth time, he still has a chance to work with you. You're still working with him. You're not forcing him to do anything. You're still working with him and communicating with him. And I've learned in years that, and it's much easier with clients' dogs than it is with my personal dogs, right? Your personal dog, you really take it personal when the dog messes up or doesn't do what he should do in your eyes or other people's eyes. Clients' dogs, you know, I really, all of my emotion is gone. I shut off all emotion, and it's just business with these dogs. So I don't get upset. I don't get flustered. The dog has really got to figure it out. And you're building a ton of independence in a dog when you're training him this way too, and that's huge. You need an independent dog out in the field. Um, you need an independent working dog. Period. They need to work well with you, but at times they need to be independent. You're teaching them to problem solve in the beginning stages of the sea collar conditioning, where they're presented with a problem. A lot of dogs just look to you to solve it, but they need to figure out on their own how to shut this pressure off. So, problem solving skills and independence that you're creating are really, really good for a young dog, or really any dog in that matter.
How young can you start a dog on the? I mean, what's the general age of a dog you want to start
I
on
won't start
collar
a dog
conditioning?
younger than 6 months.
Okay.
He's got to have enough mental aptitude to really understand some of these concepts, right? So a dog that's a dog prior to 6 months is not going to have the independence that he's going to need to start solving his own problems, right? Still looking for the mom to kind of solve all those problems for him. But around 6 months is normally what we find, where these young dogs kind of start coming into their own, young adulthood, if you would. Now they're still very puppyish, but they can make their own decisions. They can start problem solving. Um, now, understand that the younger they are, the more patience you're going to have, for the
Oh,
most part.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I always like to start off as soon as I possibly can with any dog. 6 months is normally that cutoff that we start at.
Okay. And you mentioned the technology has come so far with these levels. We run dog trips also, and I think ours have 127 levels.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't remember the last time that I nicked any of our dogs. Honestly, I mean it's pretty much locate and tone in a dog, just to get their attention and use hand signals or whatever. We did talk about it the other day. We had some real windy conditions, dogs in heavy cover like this time of year, and I'm toning that dog, and he understands what I'm looking for. He knows that, hey, Dad wants me to check in. But I don't know my world is down here. I don't
Yeah.
know. I can't see. I don't know where he's at. But so to solve that problem, I'll guess maybe go the wrong direction, as you
Mm.
mentioned, and then the more you tone that dog, the more kind of frantic he gets
Yeah.
because now he's really
Anxiety
trying.
starts
He
to
knows,
climb.
he knows he knows he's, he needs to solve that problem. But, uh, and what we went to was, and I had that problem happen to me in South Dakota a few years ago in this big, huge 1,000-acre field that was all cover almost head high. And, heavy winds, you couldn't hear anything, and even sound was playing weird. Even sound from the collar sounded like it was coming from a different direction that it really wasn't. You've had those days too, um, but it dawned on me that that dog needs to be able to orient to me where I'm at, and so in those situations I need to help him, and unfortunately that day I didn't have a whistle, but I did the next best thing. I fired a couple shots in the air,
Hmm.
and I noticed that by toning him, I could tell he had turned and he was coming in the right direction, and eventually he found me. Um, but and today we use a whistle for the same purpose. Hey, here's where I'm at. I'll blow some couple toots on the whistle. But is that kind of pretty standard across when you're looking for your dog out there too, and you've toned him, and you know that he doesn't know where you're at. He can go to that last location, but that doesn't mean you're there
Right.
because
No,
we're
no, it's
we're moving
huge.
in that field. So
Yeah. So we know where the dog is for the most part. We have to. Very rarely do we take into account the fact that the dog needs to know where we are when we
yeah,
either need him to turn back towards us, come to us, whatever it may be. So yeah, having a mechanical device like a whistle, you know, probably having two because two is one is none, right? Those little, and even the ballless whistles because those balls freeze up in there. We're hunting in really cold weather, but that dog's got to know where you are as well. Most dogs, as you know, you've raised and trained some exceptional dogs in the upland hunting game. They want to hunt with you. You are an integral part of that game and of the team, and that's really what you are. You're a dog team. Overseas, you see it all the time. You're a dog team. You're working together to survive and to win. In the field, we're working together to have the best day we possibly can, the most productive day we can. But if that dog doesn't know where you are, it's going to make it very difficult for him to hunt with you, as opposed to hunting for himself, which some dogs, as well as I do, kind of like to do until they get that bond with the owner and they get smart to the game is what we're doing out here, right? Um, Especially with pointers, man. Some pointers, the game is just a point. That's the apex. That's what they want to do. Well, I can point a bird all day with dad there or not, right? So we really need to work with them to understand where we are, how far a distance is too far, how close a distance is too close, right? I've got a dog right now I was talking to you about that did the majority of his hunting with his owner on a side by side, and he was keeping up with that side by side. So yeah, he'd run big at first, but then once he realized that I'm on foot, he felt comfortable with a 30-meter bubble or 30-yard bubble. um, I need to stretch that dog out a little bit. I need to teach that dog that to go away from me with pressure, right? That's something that I'm working with that dog through, um, because he just works in much too close on foot. He's not comfortable being far away from me. So yeah, it's all the way with the dog. But again, if the dog is confused, it's my fault as a trainer. Don't ever correct for confusion or reprimand for confusion just for blatant disobedience. And in teaching, you're going to have a lot of confusion. The more clear and concise you can be with that dog, the better. And this doesn't have much to do with e-collar condition, but training in general, right? Something you see all the time, is when there should only be one word for a command, people put about 30 words together for that command. Sit. When I say sit, your butt hits the ground and doesn't move until I give you a different command. Hey, buddy, sit. Hey, come on now, sit. Come on now, sit, buddy. Hey, buddy, come on now. We got to sit, right? Well, not, they don't, none of that means anything to them. You're just muddying up the command. So, trying to think the way dogs think as opposed to the way we think is going to be very beneficial for guys too. But with e-collar training and working with an e-collar, it's really more conducive to the way dogs communicate as opposed to the way people communicate. Pressure and release, right? Pressure and release. That's exactly how they communicate with each other, through pressure and release. Both spatial pressure, crowding, backing off, physical pressure, putting teeth on each other, pawing each other, and release, right? So again, if utilized properly, it is the most effective form of communication with your dog if utilized properly. So that proper conditioning in the beginning is paramount to having a successful program with your e-collar, making sure you fully understand every feature of it. right, before you start pressing buttons. And again, if you can only remember one thing, remember you've got to teach the dog that he can turn it off. He controls it when he doesn't, you know. He controls that. So he doesn't fear something that he controls, right? None of my dogs are scared of e-collar pressure because they know they control it. That's 100% the case with all my dogs. So never will one of my dogs feel stimulation and freak out and run away or try to bite me or bite at it or bite another dog or freeze up, right? They understand that when they feel pressure, they need to do they need to look to do something that I'm asking them to do, right? So then you get a dog that really, really wants to work with you because you're the other part of that equation, right? Um, he feels pressure. He should either stop doing something that he's doing or do something that you're asking him to do. So,
So if I go out there and put the collar on the dog for the first time right now,
mhm,
what's my what's my if it's a relatively intelligent dog, most of the hunting breeds are, that are
mhm.
bred well. What's the what's the expectation as far as how many sessions you would expect that dog starts to put that together? I mean, I know
Oh,
every
most
dog's
of the
different,
first
but
session. Now,
I mean, if you're a month into it and that dog hasn't figured it out, then is it a handler problem, or is it your
it
timing
could be
is
a handler
off, or
problem, but it's probably, if you're a month into it, it's probably an equipment problem. You probably don't even have the e-collar working properly. Um, you may just, it may not be on, it may not be making contact with the skin. Again, it's so important to make sure that both of those contact points are making contact with the dog's skin,
right?
in order for the dog to feel it. Because if there's any hair in between it, he's not going to feel it. If just one's making contact and not two, he won't feel it, right? So I always put this on myself, and I put it on the inside of my wrist, some place that's really sensitive, um, prior to putting it on the dog, to make sure that a three feels like a three and doesn't feel like a 30, right? I need to know these to put it on the dog. It's too important a task really to mess up. So being very familiar with the equipment is going to be extremely important. You don't have to be an expert, but you have to be really familiar with it. Make sure that it's functioning properly,
And
right?
that's where people like you come in. If somebody doesn't feel comfortable doing this
Mm-hmm.
conditioning, they get an expert. They get somebody that's professional like you that have done it many times before to get their dog through that process where they feel like, okay, I think it's been done right. But
Yeah.
but generally, most people could probably do it on their own if they just did a little research and
Oh,
spent the time
absolutely.
to
Yeah.
understand the equipment.
It's
Okay.
something you can do on your own. Again, it's just so paramount those first few sessions that you are
And,
very in tune with what your dog, the
and
reactions that he's giving you.
and sometimes those of us who've had dogs for years and trained dogs, I mean, we don't even think too much about it. But when you really break it down to the person out there that's listening that has their first dog, yeah, that's a man, that's a and they know that they can't mess this up, so
Yeah.
then they get apprehensive about, well, am I doing it right,
Hmm.
and so it can be kind of it can be a tough deal for somebody, but it's not that hard. It's not that difficult if you
It's
think it.
not that
You
difficult.
got to think
Again,
like the dog, right?
yeah, think like the dog and go slow, right? But in
Yeah.
each training session, each conditioning session is only about 5 minutes. I may do two or three a day
Okay.
in the beginning. Most of the dogs that I get, it's a brand new environment for them, so they're kind of getting used to the new environment all while I'm trying to condition them. So they're pretty short sessions, but again, go low on pressure if you're questioning it. Don't If you don't think the dog's feeling it, go up slowly and incrementally. Don't just you know turn that dial all the way to the right just to see what kind of get, because it's not going to be the reaction you want, and it's not going to be the reaction that that dog needs at that time for sure.
And if
Just
your dog is,
be very cognizant of that.
and if you don't know where your dog is, don't try to find him by frying him with the collar. I mean, that's
No,
because you'll cause some big problems there, obviously.
yeah, there's so
That's
many things now in an e-collar world. You've got GPS, you've got tone, you've got
right,
locate, you've got
right.
all these things. Yeah, you don't need to do that. That's just laziness in a handler when you
Well,
see
yeah,
something
and
like
in
that.
the old
Or
days, way back when I first started, when I remember seeing my first e-collar, I mean, it had like two settings,
yeah,
roast and kind of, and I mean, it was strictly was punishment. That's what it was, dog, it wasn't any kind of, you didn't have that ability to get these levels of stimulation. And
Hmm.
man, I don't, I guess maybe you could keep your dog, if your dog was chasing a deer or something, maybe you could stop him. But boy, I just don't know. I imagine there are a lot of dogs were ruined probably over the process over those
Oh,
years,
sure.
but
And those e-collars that you come across that they might have a setting 1 through 10 or 1 through 5. Man, number one is probably too hot for most dogs.
okay,
Just that lowest setting is probably too much for dogs. It's If you're going to spend money on equipment for dog training, spend it on a good e-collar and get something with a very large range. I think I said it was 120 on this dog tree. You're absolutely right. It's 127.
yeah.
I forget that because I never
I,
go past
I,
12.
I
Right.
one time said, why the hell do they have 127
Yeah.
levels? I mean, what the heck is that all about? I mean, uh, but what kind of dog would need 127? I guess to get a reaction, grizzly bear or something. I don't know,
Oh, sure.
uh,
Sure.
but yeah, I guess what's kind of nice about it is, um, and I don't know, it kind of depends on each dog being different. You kind of, like you said, you kind of know that
Hmm.
when you know that this setter is when I go in the field, his collar's usually set at a certain number, and it just
Right.
stays that way because that's just over the years of hunting him, that's just kind of what works. And
Yeah. And you'll
there
have
may be
working
some,
numbers for dogs.
yeah,
Yeah.
there may be some times when um, you get you get some kind of a situation in the field where you got a dog going towards a highway to get a cripple bird or something, and you want to, turn him quick, and maybe
Hmm.
you raise it up a little bit, to do that.
Yeah. Well,
But
you can transition. The woe command. Obviously, you're an upland bird guy.
yeah, yeah,
The woe command, you teach it on the belly collar. The dog's got to do something to shut this pressure off. On the belly, it tightens up all those abdominal muscles, makes it more difficult to walk. But once you transition off the belly back to the neck, whoa still means stop moving your feet. You
yeah.
know, you feel this pressure, stop moving the feet to shut it off. Same thing
And
if
I
he's
think
kind of going somewhere he just shouldn't
And
be.
I think we'd like to get into that. And I think what we'll do is the next episode or session we do with you, we may get a little more into the woe command and
Yeah.
and I've had people ask me and a lot of questions about putting collars on the belly of the dogs and
Hmm.
what's that all about and what you're
Yeah.
trying to do with that. And so that might be another good one to spend a little time on when we bring you back for the
It's a
next one.
great tool, man, and it's when done properly, it really, really is good for the dog. Um, and it is something that's kind of difficult, I guess, if guys don't know what they're doing, and they could probably mess some things up.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it would be good. I think it'd be good, something good to talk
Yeah,
about.
well, we got a lot of different things we're going to be able to go over with you over time, and we're
Hmm.
going to have you back from time to time. I think everybody enjoys that and are learning a lot, and I'm learning a lot too. Just been spending the time I have with you. Anybody that's trained the kind of dogs that you've trained over the years, um, and transitioning into some hunting dog stuff that you're doing now is really interesting and important. And so we all can learn. Keep learning, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Ian, we appreciate your time. Um, Anything else to wrap up on the collar end that we haven't really talked about yet?
No, the only thing that I can say is what I've said in the beginning. It's just so important that you start off slow and you look for those things in the beginning, those little details, those little movements and changes in your dog. The better you are at that in the beginning, the less time you're going to have to spend fixing issues that you create. So just remember that. And
Absolutely.
again, if anyone's listening to this and they have questions, I'm more than willing to answer those questions because the last thing I want to see are people create problems that are difficult to fix. Because
Yeah,
I've had to
and
fix quite a few of them, and my own dogs in the beginning, and a lot of other
it's
people's
always
dogs
better not
since.
to have to fix something,
That's
is to
true.
do it right the first time.
That's it.
We all have been through that. And I'll mention to our listeners out there also, if you do have questions, follow up things that you'd like to ask Ian about, just text them over to us, put them on to get on the web on our Facebook page, where we're going to be posting this interview along with some other platforms. But you can always type in some chat, ask questions, and Ian was very good about getting back to you guys, and he likes to help us all have better dogs, and so we appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Ian, again, thanks a lot. We look forward to the next time. I think I'll be seeing you in another month and a half or so.
Yeah, can't come
We're gonna,
soon enough, man.
yeah,
Got
we're
to
gonna
get
be
back
doing a
out there.
little hunting show kind of a thing that's coming up, I believe, in December. That'll be a lot of fun. And but in between then, I bet we see you again a few times. Um, we'll get some other episodes together. It seems like everybody enjoys those, and I think they're very, very interesting and can always be helpful. Like I said, I
Well,
can
good.
always, even the number of dogs I've uh, had a part in training, I always learn something, by talking to
Yeah.
other trainers. And I'm sure your experience has been the same. You think you've trained dogs for 20 years, but there's somebody comes along and you go, I never thought about that, but
Yeah.
that technique would probably work. I'm going to try that and see if that
Yeah.
works better. So
For
there's
sure.
always a lot of
Learning
things
every
out
day.
there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll let you go. We appreciate you taking the time to spend with us, and we will talk to you again soon. Uh, we will be, like I said, putting out some more episodes. If you like what we're doing, again, um, help us out. Subscribe, download the episodes. Ian's got two other ones that are out there that he did previously. That's how you can help us. If you like the podcast and what we're doing, please support it, and we'll keep doing them. We enjoy it. We enjoy putting the work, putting the information out to you all to make you more successful in the field. And as my partner Thomas would say if he was there, keep your nose in the wind.